Hello and welcome back to the Provisioning Manager video series. My name is Tom Bammert from Acadian Labs. Today we're going to continue talking about configuration and provisioning manager. So ultimately in our previous topics we've talked about all the base configuration and setting up your global variables. So now we're really moving on to the heart and soul of setting up your provisioning tasks within provisioning manager. The first thing that you really need to build as part of that is provisioning templates, and that's what we'll be discussing today. So I want to talk about really what templates are within Provisioning Manager. And ultimately, they are exactly as they sound. They templatize your configuration process to allow you to repeatedly use that process over and over effectively. And it's obviously goes much deeper than that, but we need you to understand the types of templates that are available to you. And as we go through the session today, you'll understand more and more about how you can effectively use templates and then roll those templates into what we refer to as jobs to create your provisioning tasks. So there are 5 types. Add, which of course is exactly as it sounds, adding new devices, voicemail, whatever it may be, anything that's net new. Edit, which is of course updating existing information. Edit, delete, which allows you in a single job to edit or delete multiple devices. So if you wanted to, for instance, you had multiple phones or lines that one you might want to edit, the other you might want to delete, you can actually do that in a single job. And then of course there's delete, which is pure offboard. The next thing really, and the reason why I separated this is site templates. Site templates are different than the 4 template types above, as they're really used to apply site-specific settings to a task within Provisioning Manager. And we'll cover more of this as we get into it, so I won't go too deep into it now, but I just want you to understand the different types that are available. So what do you need to do to get started? Well, you really need to plan, and that's ultimately when it comes down to, we discussed this with global variables. You need to understand what ultimately is part of your standards that you want to provision, and like use this video to help you understand how Provisioning Manager can help you achieve those things, and that will obviously help you go back and plan for what templates you need to build and ultimately what your jobs will eventually look like. So we're going to go ahead with that and get started. In order to create templates in Provisioning Manager, you need to have the role of template manager or administrator. So today we're going to log in as an administrator, which will provide us access to create and edit and delete templates within Provisioning Manager. So immediately when you log in, you'll know you have the rights if you see templates on the left-hand menu. So what I want to do before we get started is give you a little bit of background on really the templates and the approach that you can take. So as I mentioned, if you are a multi-site organization, you are always going to use site templates. And I will give a demonstration of creating a site template today, but I want to show you what site templates are before we get started, and then we're going to kind of go in order here that you would probably want to follow if you were starting to build your first templates and jobs. So first off, what are site templates? Site templates are basically an overlay. So what I mean by that is normally what you'll do is you'll create your standard templates, which are going to capture all of the global settings for your devices, your users, etc. Any site-specific settings should go in the site template. So what site templates really are is an overarching culmination of all of your settings for things like your desk phones, right? Your mobile and desktop devices such as Jabber, right? Your CSF devices, your remote destination profiles. And then if I keep scrolling down, all of your lines, anything that we construe from working with customers as site specific. So for instance, the based on template for Unity. So what I'm trying to drive at here is most cases you're going to want to use site templates. It's going to give you a lot of flexibility. And what are the benefits of this? Well, the major benefits are that when you build jobs, you get to choose your site template at the time of provision. That means that if you use site templates, you could build an onboard user or add new user job that is the same for all of your locations. And then when you go to provision, you simply select from the drop-down box, choose the site you're going to provision at, and it will apply the site-specific settings. This means instead of building, let's say you had 50 locations, instead of building 50 onboard new user jobs, you build one, and then you build the 50 site templates. And that really starts to pay off when you're building an onboard, multiple onboard new user jobs, or an edit user or delete users. You get to maintain the same jobs for all of your sites, get pure consistency, and then apply your site-specific settings via your site template. So I'm not going to create site templates first. I will come back to that. What I'm going to do is basically I'm going to show you how to create templates. And what we're going to start off with here is the end user template. And I'm not going to create a template for every single device in here because it would be a very, very lengthy video. What I want to do is show you the concept so you understand how to go through and build these out yourself. So I'm going to stick with the most critical templates, and then you can obviously build from there. So first we're going to start off with end user. So I'm going to come to end user. Obviously I have no templates in here. I'm going to go ahead and click add. And at this point, I'm going to start filling in all the information. And this is going to be very similar for every template you create. So the first thing I'm going to do is, I mentioned before, what is this template going to contain? We're going to make this very, very global, right? So let's just say I call this, universal user. If I actually spell it right, so let's go back to that, universal user. And maybe I'll make that LDAP in this case, right? Because my communication manager is LDAP. And if you're all LDAP, you don't even need to put that in there. But this is only a template name. So we're going to call this universal user, right? And then I can come down here, and this is where I start getting into the important items. So username. Obviously, in a template, I don't want to specify the real username. I don't even know what that's going to be. So this is what we refer to as at provision data, right? Data that needs to be captured at provision. So I'm going to use the global variable. So if you remember and you watched the video on global variables, you're going to want to use a global variable here. So global variables are triggered by a double bracket. Once I type this bracket, that list of global variables that we created appears. And what do I want to put in the username field? User ID, right? So I populate user ID. My end user type is going to be LDAP integrated. So once I do that, a few fields are of course going to disappear. Self-service user ID, I'm not going to populate for now. PIN, I'll just make 12345 for now. I can select user must change PIN at next login if I want. And I'm going to basically go down this list. I don't have any locales, pretty much nothing else I need here until I get to user groups. So for user groups, I'm going to go ahead and select the user groups that are important to me. So CCM standard end users, maybe I'll put in CTI, so I can do standard CTI enabled, and that's it, right? We'll leave it for that for now. And then I have presence group, standard presence group. Subscribe calling search space. If this is a great example. If this is global, right, when meaning you're using the same subscribe calling search space for all users within your cluster, by all means, select it here. Now I'm going to say that this is going to be something that would be more site-based for now. I mean, normally I would probably make this global, but let's just say it was site-based. So I'm not going to populate it now. I do want to turn on allow control from CTI devices. I do want to enable primary extension. That means that I'll set the extension that's provisioned as the primary extension when this user is created. I'm not going to do mobility at this point, but if you did do mobility, you could check that off, and you could put in the default, settings for call manager are 10,000, which is 10,000 milliseconds, and then 5 for remote destination. But I'll keep that off for now. Then I'm gonna come down. I am going to turn on home cluster because that's let's say if a multi-cluster environment that's important to me. I'm going to enable the user for IAM and presence. So you get the point. You're basically, this is all the information that's normally available to you in Communications Manager. You are putting in the settings that are specific to your environment. Now, notice I also am being careful not to pick anything that is specific to a certain site. So these are the same for all my sites. If you did have, variations between different regions in your organization or whatever, you can absolutely create more than one template, and you can name that accordingly. So I'm done at this point. The client matter code and force authorization codes, I'm not going to cover now. We'll cover them later. If you're not using them, you can ignore this section. This is all PME related data. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. If there were anything I didn't fill out that I needed to, this would have prompted me. I will make a note that you do have the capability to import data from an existing user in CUCM to help populate these items. You could simply click that, choose the end user from your communications manager. This is a real-time lookup, and you can import it. You can do it either way. If you know you have a user that has the right settings, absolutely, it's a great feature. And the one thing I like to do is I like to be very, very purposeful about ensuring that I understand exactly what fields that I'm provisioning or setting in here, especially when using site templates. So it may not fit for you to import the data. But anyway, we're at a point right now where we can go ahead and move on to the next item. And I'm going to jump from end user to line. So I'm going to leave this section. I'm going to come to line. And when I go to line, I have directory number, intercom, translation pattern, route pattern. Today we're going to be focusing on directory number. So I'm going to go ahead and click add. And what's going to happen in here is I'm going to name my template. So we're going to stick with the same thing. I'm just going to borrow that and change this to universal line. And I'm going to go a little faster here because ultimately you should be hopefully catching on now to what things are like. Again, I'm not going to specify the route partition because the route partition will be specified in my site template. So I'm going to leave it pretty much global now. Only thing I'm going to fill in here are the things that are related to my end user, things that I want to capture at provision. So my description, I would like that to be first name, last name. So you notice you can leave spaces, you can put text in between global variables. So I did 2 different global variables. And what I can do now is actually copy that, by the way, and I can paste that down. As long as it's in the right format, you're okay. Allow control from CTI. Of course, I need to fill in all of the standard items here, right? So I will, in this case, choose the voicemail profile. So I will set that because it's going to be global in my system. I'm just going to set it to default, right? If it wasn't, again, something you could do within your site template. I'm going to keep moving down. Auto answer is required, so it's off for me. You could also, set that for a headset or speakerphone. And then I'm not going to do anything with enterprise numbers, but we do support those fields. So you do have enterprise alternate number in E164. And this is going to populate by default. So I'm going to leave it because it always does the URI from the mail ID as default. If you have additional URIs, you can use any input field that's in here, you can use a global variable. And you can combine it. So I could do something, just to point out, I could do something like user ID, at, and then blah, 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 right? Test.com or something. So I just wanted to point out that you can do that. Voicemail, sure. Let's set this line up for voicemail. And that's a great point. So one of the things I'm doing here is I'm creating this line, right? And I probably want to, now that I'm creating this universal line, I might want to be a little more descriptive. Universal line with voicemail. So now I know that this line template is going to contain a forward to voicemail, because you probably will have one that ultimately does not forward to voicemail. Forward all calling search base, mine is going to be site based, so I'm not going to fill that in here. Pretty much not going to fill in any calling search based information. I'm keeping this very global, non-site specific, if you remember. So really, I'm going to go all the way down to my line on device settings, and I'm just going to paste in my information here for my display, my ASCII display, my external phone number mask. I'm going to leave all this blank because I'm going to use DN pools. And if you're using site templates, you can specify your DN pools on your site template. So leave all that off. We're going to use system policy for this, which is the default. Everything else I can pretty much leave the default. All call recording is disabled. And again, if this was the case where I was creating a line where call recording was enabled for a call center line, I'd want to probably create a separate template for that, because that's going to be a very specific job that you're doing. So I'll do gateway preferred here for recording media, and busy trigger, I'm going to do 4 and 2. These are required fields when they're, and it will not let you save. So basically at this point now, I'm going to come here and I'm going to check off those 2 boxes. And I am pretty much at the point now where I can save this. So again, one thing I'll point out is if it felt like a lot, you don't want to miss any settings, you can import from a line in your system. Again, you're just going to want to make sure you go back through and take out other things that are site specific. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. All right, and that's now saved, right? So universal line template with VM. Now, one thing that's really cool is I want to show you this. Let's say I want to have one without voicemail, right? So I'm going to come in, I'm going to copy this, right? And we're going to do universal, just universal line, All right, so we'll select that. And now I know this has no voicemail. And also, let's say that I know this is not going to be a user line. This is going to be more of a like a conference room or something like that, right? I could switch that out and make it office location. But let's say I have users that I want to put in here, but I don't want to put in any voicemail. So basically all I'm going to do here is scroll down and just take this off, right? These forwarding items. And once I'm done with that, everything else is going to remain the same. I hit save, and now I have my 2 templates. So you can copy templates and manipulate them to save some time, all right? Last thing we're going to do here for templates, for these types of templates is I'm going to go to device. So at device, I'm going to go and basically go ahead and click add. And then I'm going to come in here and, first thing I'm going to do is what device type am I going to create? It's going to force me to put a name in. So let's say I'm just going to build an 8861. So I choose 8861. I choose my protocol, and then I'm going to make this, a universal instead of user. I'm going to kind of stick with the same theme, right? Universal user. I'm going to make this universal 8861, right? Or if you want to make it less specific, it doesn't have to match, right? I could do Cisco 8861, just so someone knows what the phone model is, right? Description, same thing. I'm going to paste in first name, last name. That's what I want to populate. Device pool has to be chosen. This will get overwritten by your site template. So because this can be used in multiple ways, you have to choose a device pool because it's required. We can't build without it. So we make you choose one. So I'll just put in Boston. It doesn't matter. This stuff will get overwritten. And I'll do a standard common profile. Location, I'm going to keep moving down. I'll do hub none. I'm going to go quick here. So the one place I want to stop is right here, right? There's most of the fields that are in here are call manager, right, related. But of course, we're not going to assign the owner user ID, the actual owner user ID, but I need to specify that I want an owner user ID assigned. This will, in some cases, automatically assign the owner user ID that's being provisioned to the phone. So very, very important to get that one. And it's an easy one to miss. So all these other ones I can leave fine. Here I'm just going to do a couple of, most of these are all basically, call manager related settings. I will mention that there are a couple settings such as agent device, which we'll talk about in a little while. Not covered in this one because this is just building basic templates right now that are PME specific or provisioning manager specific. So we'll cover those a little bit later. All right, phone button template. I've got to choose one. This pulls from my system. I'm going to go down to packet capture mode, finish all these off. So we'll do none, standard. And again, you can import. So if you want to kind of populate this stuff with a phone that you know is pretty good and then just shave off the settings you don't need, you can absolutely do that with an import. No pending operation. We're good there. I'm pretty much at the point now where I can finish off with do not disturb. So we're going to do, hey, ringer off, right? And then I should be able to go ahead and save. All right, excellent. You can copy this as well. Once you change the phone type in the protocol, there will be some fields you have to re-input. So just warn you on that, but all the other stuff will remain. But I want to keep moving down the line here because we've done end user, we've done line, and we've done a device. So now I want to do Unity connection. So we're going to go and we're going to basically put in the same process here. So let this load up. Loading data. So this is pulling some live data from Unity. And now I'm going to do template type, LDAP integrated. And I'm going to do a template type as universal. And I'll borrow this. Voicemail. User with voicemail box is what I want. Based on template, again, you can choose just a default for now that's in Unity. This will get replaced by your site template if you set it. Or if you just use the same one for everyone, then it's fine. Set it here. Then you don't have to worry about it in your site template. Alias, user ID, same as call manager. PIN. This is where you can get trapped. You might think you have to specify the PIN. But remember, Unity builds a user based on a template. So in most cases, you're not going to have to set the PIN here. You can if you want to override it, but I would suggest always using the based on template to actually build out the user, and that's specified in your site template. So you could probably leave that blank. If you want to override or fill in any of these, a lot of times this will also be processed from your template, but I'm going to do display name, first name, last name, SMTP address. I'm going to make that, it happens to be user ID. I don't have to fill that in, but we do support alternate extensions and such down here. But I'm not going to really fill in anything else. So that's enough for me, right? So go ahead and hit save. All right, I'm done. And so now I've completed all the basic ad templates, right? So we've covered ad templates. And now I'm going to come back to, I'll do site templates now, and then we'll move on to delete and edit. So let's talk about site templates. Let's build one example. So now I technically have enough templates to go and build a job to build a user, because I've got an end user, I've got a device, I've got a line, I've got a voicemail. So that's a lot of users have those components, right? So now I want to build out my site template, and then we'll use this in our next video when we're talking about building jobs to put all this together, and you'll see how this all comes together. So we'll come here, and let's say that we're going to build New York, right? So that's going to be our site template. And you can get this scripted too. If you think you're going to have a couple different settings, you could do New York standard user. Nothing wrong with it. You can have multiple site templates for different scenarios. So I'll even break that out just so it's pretty clean there, right? Come in here, description is the phone description. I've already filled that in. Device pool, absolutely need to have that, right? So let's do NYC device pool. Phone button template, I've already filled out on, I don't want to specify that here, I want to specify that on my phones. Soft key template, don't need that. Calling search space, absolutely do. And you can search in here, so just type in the first few letters. So my calling search space, this is for the device, right, that I'm creating. Not the line. So depending upon what it is, just say maybe it's internal for the phone, right? I could do AAR, all these others, but I'll keep them simple for this. NYC location. I'm not going to do AAR group or anything right now. Protocol specific, I'm going to do NYC internal. And then I'll do subscribe calling search space, I'll do NYC internal, right? And for my mobile devices, if I have different settings, mobile devices include Jabber Mobile, right? As well as it can, if you don't set the CSF down below, include the CSF device. I'm going to copy my settings over to this because they're the same. And I'm actually going to do the same thing for my CSF device. Some customers have or organizations have a need to have a different device pool for Jabber versus other mobile devices just because of the way they're set up, and it makes total sense. So that's why we try to give that flexibility. Okay, I'm going to move down. We are only dealing with one line, so I can apply settings to up to 10 lines through a site template. That's our max, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to work my way down. Description I already filled in through my, my global variables on my template, but I do need a route partition. So I'm going to do NYC internal. This may be a global setting in a lot of dial plans, by the way, so you may not have to do this here, but voicemail profile, I'm going to leave it because mine is obviously going to be global, and then I'm going to do NYC internal. So everything I'm doing is going to vary, obviously, in your organization, but I'm just filling out the things that are site-specific for me to give you an example. And you can see I've worked my way down, and everything I'm doing is for line 1, right? So that's where it's going to be applied. Now we get to an important part. You remember when I created that DN pool? Well, here you go. It shows up. If I had more would show up. I'm going to choose that DN pool, and I'm going to say populate my external phone number mask, from the DN pool. So this is, not a CUCM setting. This is a provisioning manager setting, right? So now I'm using DN management, and this is where I'm going to get my number from, and you'll see later on what that looks like. Then I can go down and continue on. End user, I don't have anything I want to do there. Extension mobility, nothing. So CUC, I want to specify the base on template, right? And then I think that will be close to doing it. I'm not using anything else here. We'll cover a lot of this other stuff in more advanced provisioning videos later in the segments. So I'm at the point now where I have to do the final item, which is I have to provide access. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to give access to everybody. So template admin group, help desk group, administrators group. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. So that'll take a minute to load. And basically we're at the point now where we've created our first sign template. So we have enough to go in the next video segment. We'll build, jobs with this. Before I go, it's important for me, because you're going to be building more than just add jobs, to show you how to build, edit, and delete. So if you look down this list towards the bottom, just before job builder, you're going to see editing templates. If you go ahead and click on editing templates, we're going to go ahead and build a few templates. The first thing I'm going to start with is delete. So I'm going to come in here, and basically this is going to be somewhat repetitive as you build these. We don't include these in here because the way our product is structured, we have to get the information from the applications before we can build any jobs. So we don't actually have these packaged in here, but you're basically creating delete functions for all of your users. And frankly, you may not use some of these. That's the other thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say delete user. I'm going to go and choose end user. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to do this very quickly. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to do delete line. And I'm going to go down here and select line and hit save. I'm going to copy that and continue on, delete device. And then I'm going to come down here and do phone. And you could do device or phone, but that'll cover your jabbers and everything. And then we'll do this, delete VM. We'll come here and say Unity voicemail and hit save. So if we go back now, we have device, line, user, and voicemail, right? So that will cover, of course, what we built: end user, line, device, and Unity voicemail. So that's pretty much all I need to create a counter job to my ad, which is a delete. And we'll get into building that job in obviously the next video. So that's how you build a delete job. Delete jobs are pretty much, you can't get any simpler than that. There is some advanced functions later on, which we'll get into, but which for Unity you can do some scheduled, deletion and stuff, but we will cover those advanced features later on. So the first thing I want to do now is show you how to build an edit job. And we're going to start off very, very basic in this video. We will provide some samples in later videos of how to get more complex and how you can use edit. But let's go through and build an edit job. So I'm going to really only do one template for this, just for the time's sake of this video, but I think it will give you really pretty much what you need to understand. So let's do an edit line. Now, the template names, you're going to need to plan this out, because you can do anything you want with edit, and you're about to see what I mean. So I'm going to say edit line, change class of service, okay? And I'm going to then click edit. And there's two other types, and we'll get to edit delete in a second. When I go to edit, then I'm going to choose, of course, line type, right? It's going to pull up all of this information down here, which is basically all the settings that you are well aware of in Communication Manager that are available on a line, okay? So, and the first thing you'll see is you'll also see this use DN aging. If you remember, when I discussed DN pools, you can enable DN aging. And you're probably like, well, why do you have it on edit? Well, if you are in a lot of organizations, they don't offboard a user and delete their line. They forward their line, right? Which means that if they forward their line and it's marked as active, right, they don't want that line becoming available for someone to use in DN pools, right? So using DN aging is actually not a bad idea if you want in here. If you do, as part of your offboard process, let's say you forward the line, it's not a bad idea if you're using DN aging to include your offboarded lines to do this. But in our case, we're just creating a change class of service. So there's no reason for us to check that off here, because this template is not going to be designed for that. So now we come down and you see a couple columns. One is the directory number information, which is nothing more than all the settings. And then we have this setting for display at provision. You can use the select all button. And basically what this would create is an edit job that would display every single field and make it available for a user to edit those fields, right? When you put this in a job. But in our case, what do we want to do? Well, we actually only want to allow them to change the calling search space, right? So there's a couple options you could do here. One is you could check this box, and now you can literally create a job where it will bring up a user's line, when you search for them, and it will then display just the calling search space field and allow that person to edit it, right? And you could do that for any field in here. So let's say you wanted to make this a little bit more restrictive and say, they can only update like the alerting name and the ASCII alerting name and things like that, right? Absolutely, you can do that. And not only can you do that, but you can come over here and say, hey, for alerting name, I want to force them to use my good old first name, last name format. So you can use global variables. So that way they're not just free form typing, you're forcing them to get, to a standard of what your formatting will be. But in our case, we're not going to do that, right? We're going to go down and we're going to basically build out a class of service editing template. So all I'm going to do is check this box. I'm going to leave it as use existing settings, because if I choose a setting here, that's what it's going to put on the phone when it brings it up. In most cases, you're probably going to want the person to see what was there and then institute a change, right? Which makes total sense. So now I can go ahead and basically hit save. And I now have a template to change the class of service on a device. And you can do this for pretty much all the entities that are supported within Provisioning Manager. So you got, this is where you have to really start thinking about what tasks you want to put out for your, or basically expose for your provisioners. And I'm going to go over one more quick, very, very common topic, right, to talk about. So another thing is, let's say that you wanted to create a voicemail pin reset, right? And again, this could just be, voicemail edit pin, because this is going to be, just the template. The job can be named something totally different. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to say edit, and then I'm going to say here, I'm going to say Unity voicemail, all right? And that's going to come up. And then basically what I want to do is go down here and check off pin. Now the cool thing is, if you wanted to make this a reset pin, let's say to change it back to the default, you could actually put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and actually get rid of this display at provision, and we'll just automatically reset the field. So the reason I'm talking about this example is because this gives you the ability to essentially hide the setting that you're applying and just apply it. So the user doesn't have to type anything. So you can make a reset pin job that where the user goes in, the provisioner goes in, selects the user from the list, and basically just hits perform, and it will reset the pin to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or you could expose it, just in case maybe they get a ticket and the person's like, I would like my pin reset to this, for now. You can do that. So, if I hit save here, we'll save that off. So that gives you an idea of edit. And the last thing I'm going to cover is edit delete. And edit delete, I'll again use I'll use a device for that. So let's just say edit device, and I'm going to keep this real generic for right now. And I hit edit delete, and then I go down to phone. Okay, there's going to be no difference. So you're going to see everything here. So let's just say I want to build this as like carte blanche. You can make all changes, and I'm going to give this. I'm going to only put this in a job that, so I can say like edit device all settings, right? I'm going to put this in a job that is, obviously only exposed to maybe higher level provisioners. But the difference with edit delete is that when this job is used in a provision, is it will not only give the user the ability to edit all these fields, but let's say a provisioner pulls up a user that has 5 phones. They could edit 4 of them and delete 1 within the same job, right? Using the same template. So the job would literally be user and then just this template, and then you're done. And this will all come together when we build jobs. But I just want to point out that edit delete can have its benefits, right? But and it's special use cases, because the danger of doing this is that once you blend edit delete, you always are giving person with that job who has this template, which has this template in it, the capability not only to edit but the capability to delete. And if you want to control that, you might want to break it out a different way. But we want to be flexible, so I can go in here and just hit save, and now I've got an edit delete template. And all these template types will be very visible when you go to build a job. So don't worry about it as you build these together. What this is supposed to do here is, and the reason I'm spending so much time explaining these is I want to give you the power to understand the different template types so you can start thinking through how you're going to build out your tasks. And by all means, this is the most thought you're going to have to put into Provisioning Manager. All the other videos, if you watch them, it's very, very straightforward, very, very simple. This is simple as well, but it does take some forward thinking in order to prepare to do this, to prepare to build these templates and jobs, and we'll help you through the whole process. So at that point, that wraps this topic. Next time we'll be talking about building jobs. Thank you.